A lot of new content has been shown by the developers for Simple Planes 2, and today I'm going to go through it in detail, talk about the technical stuff, and show you some of the visual stuff, zoom into the photos, and show you all that cool stuff. Also, just a small thing, I'm currently unwell, so if it sounds like I just exited a coal mine, well, that's why. So let's get into this new amazing showcase content. To begin with, we're going to talk about terrain, texture, and detail. The devs are using a tool called Microsplat by Jason Booth, and this is actually a super impressive tool that I didn't even realize was as cool as it was until I actually checked it out on the Unity Asset Store. And it's free. At a very basic level, what this tool allows them to do is to make more detailed terrain that is very performance friendly, which is obviously going to be very useful for when Simple Planes 2 eventually comes out on mobile. Another thing they're able to do with these new textures is essentially blend them together in a way that the textures seep over into each other. This essentially allows them to create a really nice blend between the seam of both textures without them having to artistically make the seam themselves. And I think it looks pretty cool. It definitely gives the game a very stylistic and artsy sort of feel. It's hard to explain, but it's cool. Another new tool they're using that they didn't use in Simple Planes is triplanar mapping. This allows, as the name suggests, them to sample a texture from 3 different angles depending on its slope. So basically, no matter which angle you look at it from, it's going to look very nice and uniform and it won't be super, distorted or anything. And the last feature is texture tiling. Basically, when you have a single texture and you want to tile it across a large area, for example, having a dirt texture, as we can see here in the image, tiled across, it's very repetitive because it's just the same texture over and over and over and over. It's always placed the same way, seam to seam, and it looks terrible up close and even worse from far away. So what they're doing to combat this is called stochastic sampling. Basically, what this does is it rotates the textures in different ways and also positions them in different ways and blends them in different ways, which basically allows a texture to be seamlessly tiled, and it looks so beautiful. I've used this technique before because it's really great at hiding any seams and obviously hiding the tiling entirely. It means you also don't have to create a giant texture to fill out the whole area so you don't have all this tiling and all that stuff. It is a very effective and great tool. Next up, we're going to talk about foliage rendering. Simple Planes 2 has a lot of trees, and as you can imagine, loading a lot of trees is quite expensive. Most games get around this with what's called levels of detail. You can notice it in pretty much every game. Fallout 4 specifically is one that I noticed it a lot in. As you get further away from an object, they slap on a much simpler texture or even sometimes a simpler model so that your computer isn't constantly loading a high-res texture. A way some games fix it with trees specifically is by making them a 2D image once you get further away instead of geometry. You've probably seen this in a lot of older games specifically. I can definitely remember some that I used to play. And to be honest, it looks kinda ugly, and Junder agrees. So Junder are using GPUI and Amplify imposters to help with this. The first of which improves how the data flows between the CPU and GPU, and the second makes the illusion of depth, which basically makes textures that morph depending on the angle you're viewing the tree at. And according to what it says with the reference here, the trees are actually 2D in this video with some shader trickery, and this is super hard to tell because they don't look 2D. That's really impressive actually. The other problem with having a game with lots of trees in it is putting those trees down. And so Jason Booth comes out with another tool called Microverse to help with this. This guy is incredible. What this tool allows them to do is basically tell the trees to be placed anywhere there's grass. Of course, don't place them on roads. They can adjust the trees based on the altitude and slope, which is specifically awesome for mountain trees. Or they can obviously add trees manually using this tool as well. So they can, for example, as we can see here, add trees on the roadside in these little plotted areas. In these images, the yellow line represents areas they want trees and the blue areas represent areas they don't want trees. So that carves out the trees. This is a really cool tool and it's going to make the game look amazing with lots of foliage everywhere. And the final topics of today are going to be caves, rivers, and waterfalls, as well as some background objects in these images. As we know, the previous 3D games that Junder has made haven't have caves or rivers or anything of that scale in them yet, but this changes with Simple Planes 2. They've now created a way to make rivers flow down mountains smoothly, a system for waterfalls, and a way to make caves. I can only assume that the caves are made using Microsplat as well, as I saw that was something in the Microsplat description, but I could be completely wrong, don't take my word for that. It also references an underground waterfall, which is really cool. We can obviously fly and drive into these caves as well, which is going to be super awesome. You could do some cool little exploration, battles in these caves, flying through these caves like a maniac, all those sort of things. It's going to be cool. Hell, you could even do cinematics, like there's an evil dude's lair and he's got like a helicopter coming out the ceiling, he's shooting everyone. Yeah, I don't know what I'm saying. Anyway, other than that, in these images, we can see a castle in the background, which is really cool looking. Like this thing's actually pretty big. It kind of reminds me of Donut Water Castle, which is a castle that I used to live next to in Scotland. Now that I think about it, I've lived next to a lot of castles. That's weird. So yeah, that's really cool. In this other image, we can see in the very background a bridge, which is really cool looking, and a river running down towards the bridge. This part really reminds me of the archipelago from Nuclear Option. Like the bridge and everything reminds me so much of it. Like it looks exactly the same almost. And of course in the foreground is a giant hole / cave. And finally we can see this waterfall with a cave as well. Now something I noticed in both these images and pretty much all the previous images that some people are pointing out but some people have got confused about is the fact that clearly, as we can see, Chad is customizable. Here he has shorts on, he has like a summer shirt, I guess, and some sandals. Other times he has a flight helmet, a flight suit, and all that sort of stuff. So that's awesome because it's kind of a thing that you need in a game that's multiplayer, having some character variation, so that's really awesome. And of course, as always, Chad is doing all the emotes he does, so there's got to be a ton of those in this game. So that's it for this showcase. As I said, I'm going to be doing these somewhat often. About every 3 showcases I release a video. If I can't, then it'll be obviously 4 or 5 showcases in the end. Depends how big the showcases are as well. If they're not very big, then I'm probably not going to make a video on them. So look out for those, of course. And as always, I'd like to thank our members, Mr. Spherical, Sean Plays Too Much, Carnassa, Pedro, Ragnarok, and Animcat for supplying the funding for the channel. And with that said, as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.